Welcome back to NTD. I'm Chris Beers. President Trump announces 100% tariffs on movies made outside the U.S. He says it's to revitalize America's film industry as more and more Hollywood films are being filmed abroad to skirt high labor costs and taxes. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley has the details.
Our film industry has been decimated by other countries taking them out, and also by incompetence.
President Trump announces 100% tariffs on all movies made outside of the country.
It's a big industry, but it's an industry now that's it's really left, it's abandoned the USA where it started.
All major U.S. media companies are increasingly filming overseas. This includes companies like Disney, Universal, and Netflix, which film in countries like the UK, Australia, and Norway. Why? It's just simply cheaper.
I mean, I had to shoot a film for one day in LA, and it was cheaper for me to take the whole crew and fly them to Europe and shoot for 3 days, lodge them, fly them, everything.
This has been on the rise for years as Hollywood's high labor costs and strict regulations put added pressure on movie makers.
It's become very expensive to shoot in the United States for a lot of reasons, and the U.S. doesn't have national tax breaks the way some other countries do. Australia, Canada, a lot of countries in Europe.
But it wasn't always like this. Hollywood production took a dive during the pandemic and dual union strikes in 2023. The industry has since been moving to shoot their films abroad.
And just everything out there, period, is cheaper. Getting locations, the cost of feeding people, the cost of lodging for people that you have to fly out there.
Many companies that have been fleeing Hollywood and California are filming in other states that have cheaper labor costs and higher tax incentives.
It's everything from top to bottom with the films. Not only you're not getting the incentives, you know, why wouldn't you, if you can only get a very small incentive to shoot in California, why wouldn't you take your film, which the money in the budget is everything, take it to like a Georgia or a Texas where you're getting like these 30% tax incentives back.
California is trying to get its film industry back. Last year, Governor Gavin Newsom proposed doubling tax credits for Hollywood, up to $750 million.
The industry here is increasingly on life support, and it needs a pattern interrupt. We need to jolt, and you know, people looking to leave the email box over the last few months has been next level, because I do think there was an expectation that things were going to turn around after some of the labor unrest, and it didn't materialize. And
fast forwarding to now, Trump says tariffs on foreign-made movies will help revitalize what's become a declining industry in the U.S.
If they're not willing to make a movie inside the United States, then we should have a tariff on movies that come in.
But the announcement draws concerns that these tariffs could backfire.
Probably prices will go up. It'll probably get more expensive to make movies.
The White House said Monday that there's been no final decisions on how to implement the tariffs on foreign-made films, but that the administration's working and meeting with film industry leaders to protect the country's national and economic security in this regard. Reporting by Jack Bradley, NTD News.
The budget process keeps getting more and more complicated for the GOP leadership as House Republicans set their list of demands ahead of the markup of the big, beautiful bill. Our Washington correspondent Luis Martinez has the details.
It seems to be Republicans always have a hard time understanding what the American people want. And the American people didn't vote for typical Republican policies. They voted for President Trump's MAGA, America First policies, and that's what they want, and they're frustrated.
Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene lashed out against the White House and fellow Republican lawmakers because of their foreign policy focus. On a social media post, Congresswoman Greene posted, "Every single night from small towns to big cities, people fill emergency rooms with drug overdoses. I don't care about Ukraine or Iran or Houthis or whatever foreign country I'm told I'm supposed to care about." New York Republicans like Congressman Nick LaLota and Congressman Mike Lawler have drawn the red lines when it comes to supporting the president's agenda.
My bottom line is I'm not cutting benefits for eligible recipients, period.
I think we ought to focus on three things. One, taking all the illegals off. Everybody should be in favor of that. Second, we should reduce from 12 to 6 months how often you have to go re-register and get your qualification checks. And then third, we should require work for able-bodied adults. You do those three things, you save about $370 billion over 10 years, and there's a lot of consensus around those three provisions.
And moderate Democrats are now taking more hawkish positions on Russia and China.
China and Russia are looking at this administration and seeing chaos. They're seeing us abandon all our alliances around the globe. And that ultimately makes us weaker and more vulnerable as Americans to countries like Russia, China, North Korea, Iran.
It's important to note that over the weekend, the White House approved a $350 million supplemental assistance package for Ukraine. Congress will have to weigh in on the military assistance package while they seek $1.5 trillion in spending cuts for the reconciliation process. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
Can President Trump stop China from buying Iranian oil? The president threatened that anyone buying oil from Iran will be barred from doing business with the United States. China buys about 90% of Iran's oil. Plus, OPEC announces it will increase oil production above expectations. Earlier, I spoke with Carly Garner, senior commodity analyst at DeCarly Trading, for a closer look at these developments. Carly Garner, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So how reliant is China on Iranian oil in the first place?
Well, I mean, the reality is Iran produces about 3 million barrels per day. China's buying about 90% of that. Well, I should say about 90% of Iran's exports. So I think China's getting somewhere around 1.5 million or so barrels a day from Iran. The reality is, everybody's out there looking for the best deal, not necessarily the most morally comfortable deal, especially when we look at China's perspective. So this isn't shocking that they're purchasing from Iran. But in the big scheme of things, global demand for oil is about 100 million barrels per day. So this is actually probably more noise than anything in the big picture, even if we're talking about Chinese consumption.
How seriously do you think China would be taking this, though, or how seriously do you think the market would take Trump at his word here? Especially because what he's talking about is barring anybody who buys oil from Iran completely from doing any kind of business with the United States.
Yeah, I think everyone's going to probably take it serious. I think we've seen in the recent weeks that Trump has his mindset on certain things, and this is probably how it's going to go. But I will say that right now, trade between U.S. and China is pretty much frozen. Not completely, but it's as close as you can get because of the extremely high tariffs that the U.S. has put on China. And so I think China at this point is looking at this situation as an inconvenience, not a game changer, simply because we've already thwarted most of the trade between these two countries. So this is just one other thing for them to work around. I think they'll take it, to answer your question, I think they are taking it serious, but I don't think it actually changes their behavior much.
All right, you mentioned OPEC. Let's switch gears here. They said they're going to cut oil production by 411,000 barrels per day in June. How big of a cut is that, and how is this announcement affecting oil trading?
Well, what it does is it kind of changes the mindset in oil. Prior to what I'm calling this the OPEC put. OPEC has worked really hard to keep prices above 65, and they've been giving up market share for a couple of years to make this happen. I think now they've basically pulled back and said, we're no longer going to support the market. And this is a very well-supplied market, especially if we're talking about economic slowdowns due to tariffs and other things going on in the economy. So 400,000 barrels in the big scheme of things isn't a massive supply and demand disruption, but what it is just a mental game-changing. We're going from buying dips to selling rallies as speculators.
So why is OPEC cutting oil prices now?
Well, that's a good question. Their timing is a little bit interesting. We don't know what's going on behind the scenes. I would guess that maybe the regime change in the U.S. probably has a little something to do with it. Who knows how the sausage is being made. But in reality, I mean, OPEC has really been holding the line, and they've suffered financially because of it, because the U.S. has continued to produce. It actually recently got to levels, all-time high production levels in the U.S. So everybody else is hitting the gas while OPEC was tapping the brakes, and I think that they might have even regretted that a little bit. And especially if we're going into a situation where demand destruction could be real. I think OPEC's probably just in a mindset of they want to regain market share and get back, stop I don't want to say subsidizing, but stop, being the nice player in the market and get back to business.
Lastly here, Carly, how do you think this decision will affect American consumers? How do you think falling oil prices in general will affect American consumers? And how soon could we see those changes at the pump?
Well, I think we can all agree that in in the big picture, lower oil prices is better for consumers. It's better for the economy. It kind of greases the wheels of commerce. It works against inflation. And we've gone through, obviously we've all suffered for 3 years of excessive inflation, and it's still pinching consumers. And I think this is going to be a nice relief. The problem is the reason oil is selling off, in addition to OPEC supply and other things, is probably economic uncertainty. In fact, it is economic uncertainty. And I think that's probably going to continue. I suspect oil is going to the low 50s, high 40s. The last time Trump was in office, 65 was kind of the ceiling, and it traded well below that most of the time. And I think we're going to get a repeat. It's too early to tell. I mean, we're just really early into everything. But again, I think 65 is a ceiling, and the floor is probably in the low 50s or 40s, at least in the short run. And I mean, this is good for, unless you're in the oil business and you're a producer, in the shale areas, maybe this is probably a good thing for us.
All right, Carly Garner, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Coming up, 40 men and women who selflessly toiled to create a republic. We'll hear from Richard Battle, former history teacher and award-winning author whose series Americans Who Made America aims to pass on the Founding Fathers' values to the next generation, just after the break.